Welcome to the Diaries of Science Fiction, where extraordinary stories come to life. Enjoy the journey. The sunlight bounced off the crystal towers of the city like liquid diamonds, spilling iridescent light into every corner of the suspended platforms, where citizens floated or hovered from one level to another. From her perch atop a balcony, the alien woman surveyed the spectacle below with a mixture of amusement and impatience. Her long, subtle elven ears caught the faint hum of hovering vehicles, twitching slightly at the clatter of human visitors stumbling over the platform edges. She leaned lazily against the balustrade, her crimson hair cascading over her shoulder, glinting like molten copper, and her pale, luminous skin catching the sunlight in a way that made her seem almost unreal. She had always enjoyed the sense of control, the delicate thrill of watching others trip over their own limitations, especially humans. A delegation of humans had arrived that morning, tripping over protocol and each other with astonishing efficiency. One man had bowed so low, he nearly collided with a hovering chandelier. Another had misinterpreted the gravity-adjusted steps, somersaulting unintentionally across the polished floor before landing in a heap. The alien woman had laughed, a clear, ringing sound that carried across the hall, her amusement sharp but somehow contagious. "Oh, bless their naive little hearts," she murmured to herself, flicking a strand of hair back with a practiced elegance. So determined to impress, so utterly doomed. The court bustled around her. Attendants floated in carefully choreographed arcs, their robes trailing ribbons of iridescent fabric that shimmered in the light. Security drones hummed faintly, weaving through the crowd like mechanical dragonflies. She watched the humans fumble with utensils designed to manipulate molecular nutrition packets, their clumsy fingers dropping translucent food gels onto the floor, leaving tiny, glittering puddles that one particularly zealous courtier tried to mop up while sneezing violently. The alien woman's lips curved into a faint smirk. "A symphony of chaos," she whispered, and it was impossible to tell if she admired or mocked the spectacle, perhaps both. Then, with the quiet inevitability of a supernova, the king appeared on his elevated throne, framed by twisting vines that glowed faintly with bioluminescence. He had the serene, commanding presence of someone who had seen centuries pass and understood that time bent around his will. He looked down at her with a mixture of amusement and intent calculation. "Enough entertainment," he said, his voice smooth as polished metal. "It is time." She arched a crimson eyebrow, curious. "Time for what, Your Majesty?" More awkward human dances, another parade of clumsy gestures. The king's eyes glittered. "For you to marry one." The words struck her like a lightning bolt she hadn't been expecting. For a moment the balcony seemed to tilt, the sunlight bending strangely in her vision. She blinked, taken aback, and then a sharp, incredulous laugh escaped her. "Marry a human?" She waved a hand dismissively. "You must be joking. Surely this is some elaborate jest." "No jest," the king replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "You will honor this decree. The human arrives tomorrow, prepare yourself." The alien woman's mind spun. The humans she had watched all her life, their stumbles, their naive confidence, their inexplicable persistence. She had mocked them with every ounce of her being. And now she was to be bound to one. The absurdity of the situation made her laugh again, a high, melodious sound that echoed off the crystalline walls. "Oh, marvelous," she murmured, rolling her eyes dramatically. "Truly the universe has a sense of humor. Let me guess. He comes bearing fruit sandwiches and awkward bows." The king's silent glare prompted her to bite back another retort, though the corner of her mouth twitched. She turned back to the balcony, staring down at the humans below, wondering which one would be her partner in this cosmic joke. Already she could imagine the clumsy gestures, the polite errors, the accidental collisions. Perhaps there would be laughter. Perhaps there would be disaster. Either way, the thought that she might have to endure it all up close, day after day, made the corners of her lips twitch in a mixture of indignation and reluctant curiosity. That night she wandered the empty corridors of the palace, her long robes brushing the polished floor. She tested the gravity shields for fun, flipping them on and off, sending small objects to float and spin around her in a playful orbit. Even alone, she found ways to amuse herself. A hovering vase spun lazily, a flower drooping slightly before rights itself, and she caught its motion with a delicate finger, spinning it again. "Humans," she whispered to the empty hall, "if only you knew what was coming." Her amusement carried a note of challenge, of daring. She would meet this human. She would witness him stumble, fail, perhaps entertain her, perhaps frustrate her. But somewhere beneath the laughter, a thread of curiosity had taken root, subtle and unexpected. She didn't know what the next day would bring, only that it would be fascinating. And that perhaps was the first step toward a very strange story indeed. The arrival platform hovered silently above the shimmering expanse of the city, its edges outlined in soft, pulsating light that adjusted automatically to maintain balance in the thin, high-altitude air. The human stepped off the transport pod with the kind of awkward dignity that only someone entirely unprepared for alien sophistication could muster. He paused, squinting up at the towering crystalline structures, his feet sliding slightly on the anti-gravity surface. A small drone whizzed past, narrowly missing his head, and he stumbled, catching himself on the railing with a muttered, "Well, that's polite." From a balcony above, the alien woman observed with one eyebrow arched, her crimson hair spilling over her shoulder in a way that caught the light like a river of molten copper. Her ears twitched subtly at the human's cautious footsteps, each one an audible punctuation in the otherwise humming silence of the platform. She leaned forward, resting her chin on the back of her hand, her smirk sharpened by curiosity. "Interesting," she murmured. "So this is the specimen. Does he even know how to walk properly, or is that just part of his charm?" The human straightened, trying to look confident, and offered a slight bow that ended in an awkward wobble. He steadied himself, laughed nervously, and held out his hand in a gesture he hoped conveyed respect. I am honored to be here," he said, voice carrying across the low hum of hovering vehicles. "Your court, it's extraordinary." The alien woman's laughter spilled over, melodious and teasing, drawing the attention of nearby attendants and drones. "Extraordinary," she echoed, amusement dripping from every syllable. "You mean confusing, gravity-defying, and, oh yes, mildly dangerous if you don't keep your wits about you. But I suppose that is a fair enough compliment for a human." She leaned slightly over the railing, her gaze fixed, piercing yet playful. "Do you even know what you are supposed to do here, little human? Or is your plan simply to trip over the next hovering step?" He flushed, a faint hint of pink coloring his cheeks even in the bright light, but he kept his composure. I am learning quickly," he said, fumbling with a tablet-like device that projected holographic instructions in midair. The projection flickered, the 3D icons spinning as he swiped ineffectively. One of the holograms shot up like a tiny firework before dissipating. The alien woman raised a crimson eyebrow, barely suppressing a laugh. "Ah yes, learning quickly, that noble human trait. I can see it in action." They descended together into the central court, the floor beneath them, a lattice of softly glowing hexagons that responded to each step, adjusting their color and density to prevent missteps. The alien attendants floated by, whispering politely but with a curious intensity, watching the human's every movement. He attempted to greet them with a nod, which resulted in a near collision with a floating ceremonial artifact that shimmered like liquid silver. The alien woman's laugh echoed off the crystalline walls, warm and sharp all at once. "Careful," she said, flicking a hand as if to direct the artifact back into place. "Or you will be famous for destroying centuries of tradition on your very first day. Though, I admit, it would be amusing to watch." He blinked, meeting her gaze, and something unspoken passed between them. Despite the teasing, the sarcasm, and the ridiculous circumstances, there was a glimmer of respect in his eyes, a steadiness she hadn't expected. He didn't stumble further. He adjusted his stance, took a careful breath, and attempted a polite smile that somehow conveyed both nervousness and determination. The alien woman tilted her head, curiosity piqued. She had spent her life mocking humans, finding them clumsy, naive, and wholly inferior. And yet, here was one who, despite obvious errors and awkwardness, maintained a quiet dignity, a kind of stubborn grace. It was puzzling, fascinating, and she admitted to herself, entertaining. As the court guides led them to a chamber filled with hovering lights and softly whirring consoles, she whispered under her breath, more to herself than to anyone else, "Perhaps you are less hopeless than I assumed, or at least slightly more amusing." The human caught her whisper, tilted his head, and chuckled awkwardly, mistaking her comment as encouragement. She blinked, briefly flustered by the misinterpretation, but quickly recovered, smirking wider. This interaction, tiny as it was, planted the first seeds of a peculiar partnership, a strange curiosity that neither could yet name. And for the first time in her long, proud life, the alien woman wondered what it would truly be like to see a human, not as inferior, not as amusing, but as a companion navigating the absurdly beautiful chaos of her world. A sudden alert rippled through the palace, a soft, vibrating hum that made the walls shimmer faintly. The gravity shields in one section of the city had begun to destabilize, and floating platforms in the lower tiers wavered like leaves in a storm. The alien woman's ears twitched sharply, and she pivoted in her chair, eyes narrowing. It was the sort of problem her aides would normally handle in silence, dispatching drones and automated repairs while she observed, entertained, and occasionally offered a sharp remark. Today, however, the human was at her side, and she could not help but let a tiny smirk creep across her lips. "Don't get any ideas," she said, voice crisp, though the corner of her mouth quirked. "You're here to observe. That is your assigned role. Marvel at my competence." The human glanced at her, brow furrowed, but didn't retreat. I might have a few ideas," he said cautiously, glancing at the panels and glowing consoles that floated midair, projecting streams of data in holographic cascades. "If you let me." She raised an eyebrow, the elegant curve of her elven ears catching the light. "If I let you," she repeated, amusement in her tone. "This should be entertaining. By all means, demonstrate the wonders of human improvisation." As the city trembled ever so slightly beneath them, he rushed forward, fingers flying over a console, rearranging circuits and redirecting energy flows with the sort of intuitive logic that made the alien woman blink. A misfiring drone shot past, whirring dangerously close, and she leaned back in mock horror. "Oh, brilliant! You've just turned the hazard into a ballet. How very human of you." The human grinned awkwardly, dodging the next sparking drone with an agility that belied his earlier clumsiness. "Sometimes it's all about timing," he said, eyes sparkling with a mix of concentration and amusement. "And a little luck." Her laughter was sharp, musical, and utterly unrestrained. "Timing and luck," she repeated. "Yes, that explains everything humans do." She leaned forward, curiosity piqued, her crimson hair brushing against the arm of her chair as she watched him reroute energy streams. The holographic panels flickered under his adjustments, systems stabilizing one by one, and slowly, the trembling of the city's lower levels eased. "You actually might pull this off," she said, unable to hide the trace of respect threading through her amusement. "I expected a spectacular collapse, followed by a very graceful apology." He paused, wiping a bead of sweat from his brow, and shrugged. "Where's the fun in failure when you can solve a problem?" Her ears twitched again, not from irritation, but from fascination. She realized that what she had once dismissed as human weakness was, in this moment, something entirely different: adaptability. The man's solutions were not elegant in the alien sense. They lacked centuries of refinement. But they were effective, ingenious in their simplicity, and somehow courageous in execution. The crisis passed, and the floating platform steadied, glinting in the soft luminescence of the city. The alien woman, leaning back now with a hand propping her chin, allowed herself a slow, deliberate smile. "Well," she said finally, voice tinged with amusement and something like approval, "I must admit your species has a flair I had underestimated. And you, human, are surprisingly competent." He chuckled, brushing imaginary dust off his tunic. "I'll take that as a compliment," he said, "though I think you're giving me too much credit. I just followed my instincts and maybe panicked a little." Her laughter rang out again, this time lighter, warmer, threading through the palace halls. "Panicked? Oh, that is delightful. So my judgment was partly correct then. You are human after all." She stood, brushing her robes elegantly as she approached him. "But don't think this absolves you of future mockery. I intend to tease you mercilessly for every stumble, every misstep, and every minor catastrophe. Consider it tradition." He tilted his head, smirking. "I'll do my best to live up to expectations." For the first time, the alien woman saw a glimpse of something she had never expected. Admiration, yes, but also curiosity, resilience, and a stubborn charm that made her want to pay attention in a way she rarely did for anyone. And as they looked at each other across the softly humming consoles, amidst the repaired platforms and stabilizing drones, she realized that the world she had always ruled with amused superiority was suddenly, slightly, unpredictably, interesting. The day of the ceremony arrived with a sky that shimmered like liquid silver, reflecting the crystalline spires of the city in a dazzling, fractured mosaic. The floating lanterns above the central plaza pulsed softly, synchronized with the hum of the gravity stabilizers, casting gentle ripples of color across the faces of the court. The alien woman stood at the edge of the platform, her crimson hair flowing over her shoulders, ears tilting subtly as she surveyed the crowd. She was regal, poised, every inch the figure of high status, yet there was a lightness to her posture that had not been there before. A faint, amused smile played at her lips as she watched the human arrive, moving with the careful precision of someone who had learned much in a short time, but still carried the hint of delightful awkwardness. He approached with steady steps, eyes bright, and a small, almost mischievous smile tugging at his mouth. In the days since the gravity shield incident, he had shown patience, intelligence, and humor that had subtly but irreversibly changed her perception of him, and of humans in general. The alien woman had spent a lifetime assuming superiority, mocking the fragility, naivety, and clumsiness of another species. And yet here was proof that respect could emerge from courage and curiosity, that humor could bridge even centuries of hierarchy. As they stood side by side on the ceremony platform, hovering ribbons of bioluminescent vines swirled around them, soft lights glinting off the metallic surfaces of hovering drones and ceremonial consoles. She tilted her head, watching him adjust a small, floating protocol hologram with deft fingers, his human ingenuity harmonizing unexpectedly well with the alien technology around them. A faint chuckle escaped her. "You do know how to ruin my reputation as an omniscient observer, don't you?" she said, her voice teasing yet warmer than ever. He glanced at her, brow raised, and grinned. "Ruining reputations, that's what humans do best." The alien woman's ears flicked at the joke, and she allowed herself a genuine laugh. The sound carried across the plaza, drawing curious glances from dignitaries and attendants alike. Some whispered about her newfound levity, but she ignored them. Her focus was on him, on this partnership that had formed in the crucible of awkward introductions, minor disasters, and shared triumphs. The ceremony progressed, a dance of light and motion, each ritual step balanced perfectly on the threads of floating platforms and energy conduits. They moved together with surprising synchronicity, the alien woman guiding the human through traditions with gentle corrections, while he adapted in ways that impressed her more with every gesture. A small hiccup occurred. A hovering lantern wobbled dangerously near the edge of the platform, but he caught it with a reflexive leap, saving the display with a flourish that drew a soft laugh from her. "I swear," she whispered, shaking her head, "your species makes every crisis look like a performance." By the time the final protocol was complete, a sense of completion had settled over them. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not the awkward, stumbling figure she had mocked, but a partner who had challenged her assumptions, earned her respect, and drawn her laughter and curiosity out in equal measure. He had faced her world, its rules and dangers, and had not merely survived. He had thrived, adapting in ways that demanded recognition. "And so," she said quietly, her tone softer now, almost reflective, "I suppose I owe you an apology for all the mockery." He tilted his head, smiling, and she allowed herself another chuckle. "Not necessary," he said. "I rather enjoyed it." The crowd observed silently as the two of them exchanged a final glance, one that carried the weight of shared understanding, mutual respect, and a hint of something more delicate, more promising than either had expected. The alien woman, once so certain of her superiority, felt a shift deep within herself, a recognition that connection, humor, courage, and curiosity could transcend species, hierarchy, and expectation. The human man, in turn, understood that there was a depth and complexity to her world he had never imagined. Yet somehow he had been welcomed into it not by domination, but by shared experience and laughter. As the ceremony ended and the floating lanterns drifted higher, blending with the silver sky, she leaned slightly toward him and whispered, just for him, "Perhaps humans are not entirely hopeless after all." He laughed softly, and she caught herself smiling wider than she had in decades. The moment was simple, small, yet complete, a quiet testament to the journey they had shared, the lessons learned, and the promise of a strange, improbable partnership that would continue far beyond the bounds of ceremony, expectation, or even species. The city below shimmered, steady and alive, and for the first time, the alien woman felt her laughter and curiosity stretching beyond mockery, embracing a world more fascinating than she had ever imagined.